When Tony Jaa first exploded onto the scene in 2004 as Ong Bak, he seemed destined to become the world's savior of martial arts films. This fresh new face brought a jolt of energy back into a genre populated by aging stars such as Jackie Chan, Van Damme, and Steven Seagal. Ong Bak was a massive success in his home country of Thailand, but more importantly, around the globe. Martial Arts Great Donnie Yen even stated that Tony Jaa had beaten Hong Kong at their own game, and even acknowledged that Ong Bak was a motivating force to do better in his own work. With all this attention, Tony Jaa was deemed an overnight success. However, this acclaim of overnight success completely ignored the fact that Jaa was not actually a newcomer at all, as his first notable screen credits came in 1992, 1994, and 1996 at a few low-budget Thai productions. Soon after, in 1997, he was part of a much bigger production working as Robin Shou's stunt double in Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Jaa's overnight success was actually a result of working hard and toiling around in near obscurity for over a decade. The truth is that the idea of being an overnight success is a myth. It's a carefully crafted narrative, which we conveniently buy into as a form of wish fulfillment. Anyone who has achieved anything great in life has tirelessly put in the work, the time and energy for years, sometimes decades before ever getting noticed. And that big break, luck, what some may call, is really just the result of preparation finally meeting opportunity. Although we all want to feel special and extraordinary in some way, the fact is most people have enormous ability and potential, so there's nothing wrong with being ordinary. What's more important is to have extraordinary discipline, drive, and work ethic in order to achieve any level of greatness. And Tony Jaa was certainly great. Just hear what some of his contemporaries have to say about him.
Tony Jaa is, when I say one of the greatest martial artists alive today, he really is. He's the most talented physically ever. When I say ever, I mean ever.
But he's made from different DNA.
Nobody could do what Tony Jaa can do. That man can jump over a car, walk over you, do a flip and kick you in the head. When I say he's the most physical, nobody can do. Nobody could do that stuff.
I think he's great. You know, I see so many action stars in the world. He's the one of them very, very physical. You know, action, jumping, you know, do all the things really, really good.
You could just look, like this guy just jumped over somebody's head and kicked him in the back of the head. Like come on. Everybody's got their accolades.
Right.
Nobody could do that.
Wow.
What Tony Jaa could do without even warming up, nobody can do.
I think he's lucky. He sees so many our film.
Yeah.
Now he can combine everything together.
Yeah.
Yeah, used to be we don't know which way we're going. Okay, first kung fu, pack. Later on kung fu with action, then kung fu action with a stunt with acrobatic. After acrobatic, you're doing a motorcycle, car stunt, everything. Now Tony Jaa, the same, you know, boom, you see everything, put everything together, boom, in the one movie.
He was touring and doing Ong Bak. He was doing demonstrations in the movie theater, like doing amazing stuff right in front of everybody.
He's very powerful. I've never felt power like it, to be honest, from any other martial arts actor. The speed and the power that he has is honestly mind-blowing. You see it in the movie, obviously, but to see it in the flesh, in person, to feel it, I was covered in bruises. I knew it was going to be hard, and I didn't want it to be any different than the quintessential Tony Jaa experience should be.
Tony Jaa certainly has all the martial arts talent in the world. However, that is never enough, especially since the martial arts boom eventually faded in the 1990s. Add to that, one of the appeals that Tony Jaa has is that he can do all of his own stunts without wires and CGI. However, major studios want their stars, especially their leads, to avoid injury at all costs. So what actually seems like a big benefit for the performer to have is actually detrimental for a major movie studio if they were to use that star's abilities in full. These days, a martial artist would probably have a hard time trying to break boundaries in their movie, with the studio consistently worrying about them and their investment. Also, since the UFC entered the mainstream in 2006, it made mixed martial arts fighting a common sight. In the end, this made martial arts movies suffer, as the magic and appeal martial arts movies once provided throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s quickly evaporated. Going back to 2004, the original Ong Bak grossed roughly $2.5 million at the Thai box office, and pulled in another $17 million internationally, and just like that, Tony Jaa, the newcomer, seemed to be the biggest name in martial arts movies. Bigger and better things would soon follow with The Protector, which scored another chart-topping performance in Thailand, where it grossed nearly $4.5 million, and then another $23 million internationally. Though critics were not too kind to the film or Jaa's acting performance, it seemed his star was sealed and the big Hollywood offers began to roll in. After months of speculation as to what his next project would be, word began to circulate that Jaa's relationship with Prakeo Pinkau, the director of Ong Bak, had broken down over Jaa's insistence that he didn't need the director anymore and wanted to direct himself. The studio ended up handing Tony Jaa's biggest budget yet in order to make his directorial debut with the prequel film Ong Bak 2. The film ended up becoming a nightmare on several levels. Jaa ended up having a complete meltdown on set and simply disappeared for 2 months, causing the film to fall behind schedule. When Jaa returned to work, he found his director's role was taken away and handed to his mentor, Pana Ritchie. The budget got out of control, and the studio made the last-minute decision to do rewrites and split the film into 2 in the hopes of recovering their massive cost overruns. Having 2 films instead of 1 gave them a much better chance of recouping their investment, but it ended up being at the expense of Tony Jaa's career. Despite the larger budget and massive sets of Ong Bak 2, the film only managed to pull in $2.9 million at the Thai box office and an even less impressive $6 million internationally. Things got even worse for Ong Bak 3, with it failing to even crack the top 5 domestically released titles in Thailand with a mere $1.3 million take, which was less than half of what Ong Bak 2 grossed, a sure sign that the local audiences lost interest. Internationally, it would fare even worse and ended up only grossing $1 million. Tony Jaa subsequently stepped away from movies for a time and became a Buddhist monk. He would return in 2013 for the sequel to The Protector. 2015 seemed to be the year of Tony Jaa, as he played the role of a villainous henchman in Furious 7, then appeared alongside Dolph Lundgren and Michael Jai White in Skin Trade. He'd also make his Hong Kong debut in SPL 2. He still remains active to this day, and later this year in 2023, he'll be in the latest installment of The Expendables, starring alongside other action greats. Despite his involvement in those films, Tony Jaa was never quite able to recapture the same level of fame he had after the original Ong Bak and The Protector. And to this day, people often wonder whatever happened to him. Oh, it'd be interesting to get your opinion on this. What has happened to Tony Jaa since he blew up on Ong Bak?
He's in Expendables. Keep an eye open.
So he's still doing stuff, but like I think where this guy's going, he was like the lead in a theatrical movie and kind of taken, you know, like what what Van Damme and Skull was doing. It's kind of like him and Jason Statham, and they were like the leads in these like theatrical release movies, but it kind of like he did a couple of those and just kind of fell off for whatever reason. But Jason Statham kept going to the theater as the lead, right?
Yeah, I personally feel like it's with him and even with Jet Li. If you go back, like he had Romeo Must Die, Kiss of Death, or Kiss of the Dragon.
Oh,
he had a bunch, right? He had a bunch that, you know, you're like, okay, cool. And it was almost like Jackie or Jet Li, the one. There was so many things coming out. Even War with him and Statham, right? But when you look at Jet Li and Tony Jaa, there was a huge language barrier. It was a huge language barrier that they did not address 100%. Jackie had a language barrier too.
Do you speak any English?
And then he worked on his English, and it almost became a part of his character. Just like with Arnie, he had that thick accent. Jackie had his, you know, I don't want any trouble. Okay, like he started having the very Jackie trademark dialogue, right? Where you expected before he was gonna fight, he didn't want any trouble. It became one-liners, it became memes, it became everything that was part of his brand. Arnie, the same thing, right? His cheesy one-liners, right? Sure. Freeze, right? You're like, what just happened, right? When he was what, Dr. Free and Mr. Freeze, right?
Allow me to break the ice.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of things that package you and qualify you as a lead person. Statham had no problem with his English. In fact, people found it to be very cool when, you know, he was down here and he was a little bit like, and that's just who he became. He became the transporter in every movie. He brought that vibe with him in every movie, and that was great. You know, the Red that can fight, and it was really, really cool, right? So if you go back and you see Tony Jaa, it was very action oriented, and Jet Li was very action oriented, which is great, but they needed at times to be able to speak.
That's a good point, man. Yeah, with Jason Statham, it worked because I know in general, a lot of people in America don't really care for the English accent. You know, it seems weird, but he's got like a cool one. Like I don't know how many different like English accents there are, but his really works for like even American audience. You know, whereas a lot of other guys not so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And he packaged it real well. That's once again some of the stuff that I'm saying. Like Scott has some of his, like they could pull off probably the same accent if they just bring it down a certain level, but how they packaged Statham was really, really smart, right? I wish the same thing happened for Scott, where they packaged him. You're a lead. This is who you are. You're the cool dude. He had the physique. He had the skill. He had everything, right? Like he was more fancy and flashy with his martial arts than Statham is.
Oh, sure.
Right? But it's all about the packaging. It's how you package stuff.
I also think, and he kind of brought this up himself when I interviewed him. I mean, because he's been doing movies for like 20 years. I think because he's done so many of like the lower budget straight to video, that's just how people see him. And in some ways, almost like a glorified stuntman. So when he gets a bigger role, I mean, he did great in John Wick 4. Great performance, good lines, good acting. You know, a little less degree in Expendables. But when they use him in Marvel movies, it's like he's like a glorified stunt guy. So it's almost like I think, because it's even like if you go back to the 80s and 90s, you know, you take any of these guys like, say, Lorenzo Lamas, amazing on Renegade, did a string of straight-to-video movies. It's really hard to break out of that and then just, you know, you did like a dozen straight-to-video movies, all of a sudden you're going to be in like a theater movie. It's almost like you get stuck, right?
Well, that's the packaging. That's exactly what I'm talking about, right? That's exactly it, is whoever is on your team can package you a certain way, right? They did the same thing with Dwayne Johnson. They did the same thing with Cena and Vin Diesel, where it was like action guy. And then once he stood on that platform, they're like, oh, well, you could do a family movie. You're a dad or you're a babysitter. It's literally, they just gotta help you carve that path and navigate it. That's why you have a team, right?
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
Because Van Damme could have stayed as a bad guy the whole time. He did his splits. He came in and he was a hired gun European dude, like when he first popped up. But then someone believed in him. Plus, he had the grind and the hustle. And he kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And then they're like, "Oh, cool. All right, let's put this guy in the forefront." Scott had that. He really did.
Yeah, it was really Lionheart. And Sheldon talked about that. That's why Universal picked it up and distributed it, even though it was like a smaller Imperial Entertainment movie. But they seen he can actually act and hold the audience when he was like just. It wasn't when he was fighting in the movie. It was like when he was interacting with the niece when he met her for the first time. You know, they're like, okay, this guy could actually be a leading man. He's kind of got the drama and the dialogue and good interaction with the young actress. So